Hello and welcome to the second episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan. I am a cinematographer, the founder of Albot Digital Cinema, a production company here in West Los Angeles, and a contributing writer of ProVideoCoalition.com for the past 4 years or so. This podcast is a conversation between cinematographers about the work. In the first half, we're going to get to know the guest in question, talk about their influences, how they got to where they are, that kind of thing. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about, the work that they're here to promote, because usually that's why you get an interview, is because they're there to promote something they've worked on, which should be the case, because then we get some case studies, right? So in this episode, we've got Josh Richards, the DP of Nomadland. We had a great conversation, a lot of fun. Great, lovely man, very nice. He talks about his time at NYU, his search for the sort of classic American landscape that Western films sort of sold us on. Some conversations he had with Roger Deakins briefly, you got to throw that at the head because everyone likes to know what Roger thinks. Sir Roger, sorry. And just a great, fun conversation. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it, so let's let him speak for himself. I'm rambling at this point. So, without further ado, here is Josh Richards. Hello, so we've got Josh Richards here. He is the DP of Nomadland, and today we're going to talk about shooting the film, a little bit about himself, all that kind of stuff. It's the first episode of the thing that I've just named. What did I just name it? Frame and Reference, because we're talking about the individual frames and the reference that brought us there, both in life and in the film. So Joshua, say hello to the people.
Hey, Kenny, thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
So to get started, I just like to, talk about you. So what got you started in cinematography?
My background, initially, I wanted to be a painter. Sort of fine art was my background. I think I just realized I had nothing new to say in that medium. Or if I did, it just seemed like such a daunting mountain to climb, And I was also, I loved photography, and I was always snapping away and loved movies. I was brought up on a lot of Westerns. My dad was a big Western guy, big John Ford and Anthony Mann and people like that. So I think those things just like a lot of us, mate, isn't it? Those things sort of all came together, and film just seemed so exciting to me, Even at a young age, it seemed pretty clear that it's still such a sort of untapped medium. I got really big into Charlie Chaplin early on, and then it was only when along with Westerns, and it was really only when I discovered people like Werner Herzog, Kenny, that I started realizing what film can really be, probably a little bit more outside of the Hollywood 70s stuff I was watching. It was like, wow, film can kind of, truly be this powerful form of language and communication. I hadn't really thought of it that way. And then I got my eyes set on film school. And for some reason, I grew up in Penzance, Cornwall, and not a lot of filmmakers come out of there. It's pretty, it's true. Like, for those who don't know, that is deep, deep southwest England. And it's a sort of fishing industry that's a little bit on its knees. So there's not much hope of becoming a filmmaker down there. But for some reason, I just got in my head, Kenny, that I wanted to go to NYU. And that's what ended up happening.
I certainly applied there.
Did you?
And, I ended up going to Arizona State, so you can guess how they thought about me.
Well, do you know what, though, mate? The whole time I was in New York, I was longing for that landscape, I was like, where do I have to go? Like Nomadland and these things. That's why I came to America, I wanted to get out into the heartlands, and I would ask my professors in New York, like, where do I have to go to this landscape I'm talking about? And they're like, probably like 5 states away.
Yeah, I've noticed
where you were.
Yeah, well, now I'm in LA, so it's a little less exciting at the moment. But you ever been to Colorado?
Yeah, we lived in Colorado for 2 years. Lived in lived in Denver, down on Colfax for about 2 years, and that was when we made The Rider. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's been quite interesting how the films have kind of changed our life, Kenny, because after making songs, I don't know, I just couldn't settle back into New York after that experience. It was quite a long time we spent out there on the reservation in South Dakota, and when I went back to Manhattan, I just couldn't feel comfortable anymore. So then we moved out into the sticks, to Beacon, upstate, which is where Chloe edited songs, and then we moved to Colorado, just to be near to the reservation, I suppose, and we'd fallen in love with the Rockies. What'd you ask, by the way? What'd you ask?
Oh, I used to run the college ski club, and I've been helping do that ever since. I haven't had to pay for a lift ticket in 11 years. I didn't obviously go this year, but so I'm in Colorado all the time. It's like and I get that. Like, I love LA. I love cities. I grew up in the Bay Area, but there's just something about the quiet of a mountain town, especially when it's snowing. Like, that's just, and there's also like a camaraderie that I don't necessarily feel in a bigger city.
Yeah. And I think for me personally as well, mate, like when I was at NYU, there's a bar right next to NYU called the Apple Bar. And I do remember one of my professors saying, Josh, there's two kinds of students here. There's those that go home and write their scripts after class, and there's those that go to Apple Bar. And I know which one I was, Kenny. So what I'm trying to say is part of, for me, getting out of New York was also that silence you're talking about, being able to focus more and not sit around talking about your films, but just getting out and making stuff. So it's actually, in my career, that's been incredibly important, making that distinction. Stop talking about it, just do it.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've talked to a lot of my friends about, even outside of cinematography. And that's, you can spend all day reading your favorite cinematography books, going on, there's certainly bad stuff on YouTube, but there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube, like this interview. You can go on Roger Deakins forums all day, but you're not going to get that institutional knowledge from just doing it. Like, you can only prepare so much.
Yeah. And I think from Chloe's point of view as a writer and director as well, she feels the same way. It really is like Kerouac said, man, you want to be a good writer, just write the shit out of it.
Yeah. And so for people who don't know, Chloe Zhao is your collaborator, I suppose, at this point.
Chloe is also, we're also a couple.
I see.
We're a partnership. And that I really have learned so much from as well, Kenny, man. I mean, the value of collaboration, of close collaboration like that, that's such a huge part of it as well, isn't it? Because I know so many talented DPs, and probably more talented ones than I, who just haven't really got the project yet.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? You must know a lot of people too, mate. You can tell that there's so much great stuff out there visually, but if you don't get this, if the story doesn't come your way, or if you're not finding collaborators, it's tough.
That was I reached out to the old internet to see what questions they would have for cinematographers if they had this opportunity. And a lot of them wanted to know about, like, literally just that, like, how do you find jobs? How does that even happen? Jobs don't grow on the jobby tree.
Yeah. Well, film school had to be my route. I'm not sure I recommend it, but I know how that feels. I was in London, no doors opened for me. I just couldn't, I had a undergrad film degree in creative writing. So I read scripts for months for money. And that would actually be my advice to cinematographers. It might sound weird, but get really good at reading scripts. We're concerned with the language of cinema as much as anything else. We want to start there, don't we, Kenny? Not with the more cosmetic things of cinematography, that comes later. First and foremost is building that foundation of what is your language? How do you want to make movies? Maybe you're a DP that can, is a chameleon and can fit into every different project. I knew quite early on that I wasn't that. And so my advice, if for the way I thought of it when I was at film school was I need to come up with what my language is, and I need that to be recognizable to people. And because I want to be one of those DPs where they say, you know, who'd be great for this is Josh Richards because of what he does, and that becomes recognized, and then they can bank on that. You know what I mean, Kenny? And I think that's quite valuable to people when they can see your fingerprint.
I think that's huge. I've seen, especially these days, a lot of people will put out their reel, and their reel it'll be like, I can do commercials, short films, blah, 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 blah. And instead of really focusing on creating a look, they will show the project. Like, oh, look, I made this mistake. You know, all of my work was in fashion for the most part, fashion and music videos. Yeah. And then I got one short film and I put that at the head of the reel. And I sent it to a guy who I had worked with who was impressed me. I've worked with a lot of British companies for some reason. Send it over to him. You know, P&Co, the company, clothing company.
Rings a bell, mate. Yeah, I mean, I've been here for 12 years, mate. So I'm pretty much American.
Fair. Yeah. Welcome. But yeah, I sent it to a buddy of mine who lives in the UK, and he just sent back like, delete that first part. I was actually, you know what? I'm saying that backwards. I sent my reel to work for him, and he said that he sent me a reply. He said, we're going to use you. I want you to know that I shut off your reel in the first 5 seconds, and it was my wife who watched the whole thing and told me to turn around and call you.
Oh, cool.
And it was just because I put the thing that I thought, I was like, oh, like if I put this crappy clip of the short film I worked on, people will know I can work on short films. And it's if you have a defined look, people will want that for their project, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, reels are tough though, aren't they, man? Especially when you're editing your own, you know, and being kind of objective about it. And yeah, reels, I don't know if I ever made a successful one either, to be honest with you. You know, I think what happens with those is the risk that happens to all of us as cinematographers, mate. And I do think it's getting too cosmetic about things.
Sure.
And the thing with that, as you know, with commercials and like that can make you money. But do you really want to be that? I mean, you know, the amount of times clients come up to me, Kenny, and said, can you make her look prettier? And I'll never get that part of my soul back again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do have to make up your mind about, you know, there's a lot of things, aren't there, to consider when deciding on your language and how you want to work. You know?
Yeah. Do you have I know you're saying you watched a lot of like Westerns and stuff, but is there like a specific look influence? Like for me, I'm not speaking as an individual here. Like I think everyone's enamored with the guy, but Fincher's cinematography, you know, what he kind of imposes on his DPs, I've always thought was boring in a good way. Like it's always just so perfect. And then I found out, you know, obviously how much work he's doing in post with split comps and deleting lights and boom holes and all this. But like that idea of start from perfect, I always thought was important in some way.
Well, that's interesting, Kenny, because I'm probably the opposite school of that. As much as this is what's cool. Like at film school, I look at Fincher and I'm like, love it. The softness, there's a character to his films that I think is stunning. I'm just not going to be able to do it, you know. Sure. And I knew that early on, and I'm like, and also that the technicalities of that excite me far less than for me personally, if I'm out in a landscape with a face that I like.
Yeah.
And that's what I discovered for me. And then you kind of just keep chipping away in your direction, and there's people who guide you. For me, it's probably Tarkovsky, I think.
Okay, awesome.
I look at his films, I'm just blown, man. Like, you know, I also saw and I was talking to Roger Deakins recently, mate. My good old mate Roger.
Yeah. Sir Roger.
Sir Roger. Call myself a Brit, man. But no, he said he was like, yeah, because he said I want to get to understand Tarkovsky more, and I thought that was really cool. You know, it's like I feel the same way. I like watching stuff that I don't quite understand. You know, I feel like it's making me grow as a filmmaker, and I also watched a lecture that Tarkovsky was doing, mate, where he said if someone said, "Oh, that shot's like that shot in this film," then he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
If a shot's been done, I'm not doing it. It needs to be completely new. It needs to be for the story. It can't be like another movie. So there you go. That's a completely different way of thinking about film, when compared to someone like Tarantino, for example. So, there's just so many ways to do it in this art, in this medium, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, that I think, I see a guitar back there. Are you a musician in any form?
Oh,
or you just have a guitar?
Again, mate,
Yeah. But so I'm a drummer, and I've always thought like there's something in my head that music and cinematography or filmmaking and cinema and music are intrinsically linked. And one of those things was like when you're playing guitar and your favorite musician uses a certain pedal in a certain guitar, so you buy that stuff and then you sound exactly like him, and then you lose complete interest because you did it. But then you kind of go back a little bit later when you've got your own thoughts and you're like, I don't actually like that pedal. I don't really. Did you find yourself doing that with cinematography, where you were copying first and then was like, all right, I'm done here?
Yeah, because that's what you do in painting as well, Kenny. Your apprenticeship is just going to be copy, 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 and then that's how you understand the technique. Now, what do you want to do with it? So yeah. I didn't kind of go at it in a technical way though. I wasn't like, I more just like watch Chris Doyle and just try to absorb the freedom of what he's doing, or the boldness of lens choice, or I'm more just influenced in that way rather than like, how exactly do I achieve that thing? I suppose I'm not, I'm probably a bit more in the Jackson Pollock school. Do you know what I mean, mate? Than anything too intricate in the way I approach things, if that makes sense.
I've noticed in sort of your body of work, there's a lot of naturalism. Tchaikovsky is probably the answer there. But how do you this will dovetail us into the project you're here to promote, but how do you embrace naturalism? How do you use available light? Are you like really grip heavy over lamp heavy, or what's kind of your approach there?
Yeah, definitely grip over lamp. I was forced to embrace it though, Kenny, do you know what I mean? So we were all starting with making films with no money and, and no equipment. But also, yeah, like you mentioned Tarkovsky, and also obviously Nestor Mendros and like Robbie Ryan is a, great, Akapor, all these guys really led the way for me in terms of natural light. And I'm kind of going, oh, okay, well, I love how these movies look, and they're not using lights, so I'm good, right? What Malik's been doing, and I just honestly love it, man. No day is the same. You can never quite plan what it's going to be. Weather is a sort of a common enemy that like unites everyone, isn't it? In a weird way.
Sure.
Found that like, a lot of the dramas of the film set kind of go out the window when we were all chasing the sun.
There's definitely something to be said for, obviously you want to enact a plan, but that common enemy thing definitely like stops arguments. If you have too much room to think, you'll start to bite each other. But if
people start going inward, don't they? Me. But in the landscape and the weather, it's like, no, the film. Remember the film? So it's really helpful in that way,
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, we could talk all day about natural light in a sense, but I also realized talking to you, mate, I never had like mentors in cinematography either. Did you?
No. Yeah,
like we're quite alone. You can quickly feel quite alone and in a void, can't you, as a cinematographer? Because you don't really, I don't know about you, I don't know many other cinematographers. I don't really hang out with other filmmakers. So sometimes I could probably do with a little more camaraderie and learning from my peers a bit more, or just feeling like we're bouncing off each other, because for the most part, it's all happened in a vacuum, really.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same way. There's, I know most of my friends, like I'm lucky where all my friends from college moved to LA with me, and so we've known each other for 12 years. And we were all in film school. So, but no one, I was the only cinematographer, a couple editors, a couple directors, whatever. So even when I make stuff, they're like, "Oh, good job." And they don't watch it, the classic, the old classic. But, yeah, I think I know one cinematographer. He lives across the street from me. His name's Johnny Durango.
Damn, man.
Yeah. Great name on Johnny.
He's already on his way with a name like that.
Yeah. He got directorofphotography.com.
No.
I don't know how he pulled that off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a strange relationship, though, as well, isn't it, between us DPs and filmmakers in general? You can quickly, it's the first thing people say. "Oh, you should meet my friend who makes movies," and la-di-da. And you just think, not really, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they're like, "Oh, my friend directs movies." "Oh, really? What did they direct?" "Well, right now they're writing the script, but you should shoot it."
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
"Oh, dude, I've got a script. My friend's got this script. You should. It's gonna. Yeah."
My buddy, you should really. It's great. He's really funny. Take it to your director friend who just won an Emmy.
Yeah, we have to take it on the chin, don't we? It's like when I was doing creative writing. But every pub, everyone's got a film. Everyone's got a script and a story. They just haven't got round to it yet.
Oh man, in LA, there's definitely I can count probably twice off the top of my head where I was in an Uber. Inevitably, what do you do? So, cinematography. "Oh, if you look behind the seat there, I got my script."
Really? It's so cool, though. I love
There
it.
It is.
I love it.
It's about that thick,
Yeah, have you edited this?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I was going to say, so we can get to, instead of talking about other people. So talking about Nomadland, this is a story about Frances McDermott. What's going on in her life in the movie?
Well, Fran plays a character called Fern, who is widowed and has also left her hometown of Empire, Nebraska, which has actually been discontinued. It was a sheetrock factory, which means in the middle of the desert, right by Burning Man. And believe it or not, once that factory shut down, that meant that was it for the town. And anyway, Fern leaves Empire and starts finding new purpose on the road across the American heartlands, meeting other nomads and bouncing off, other people on a journey and kind of learning that. I'll stop it there, mate.
Fair. What? It sounds a little, maybe not dire, but a little more serious of a film, potentially.
I hope it doesn't feel dire. I mean, it certainly deals with grief and loss, and it deals with being in a world that you don't belong in, that you don't feel you belong in anymore. However, I mean, our approach on it, mate, was that it feel like a spiritual experience somehow, or this sort of feeling of like, what Malik's been exploring in his films somewhat, that Fern discovers herself in this landscape, and so it does.
Right.
The book that it's based on by Jessica Bruder, Nomadland, I mean, it really is challenging our kind of societal norms in terms of like the way we live, the house, the mortgage that we get, these things. And then in America, sadly, we have this generation, sort of baby boomer generation, predominantly women, just possibly even more troubling, who find themselves having worked their whole lives and their social security is nothing. They can't afford a house. They have no choice but to do what they're doing, which is to live a sort of transient lifestyle as a nomad. And that can sound dire and bleak, certainly. And I think we've seen that movie. What Chloe wanted to do was challenge the other thing. It's like, well, actually, perhaps there is another life to discover in those golden years of your life when you don't need those societal norms. Perhaps by letting go of them, there's a new kind of freedom and identity to be found.
I mean, there's certainly these days a lot of people across the spectrum doing a lot of soul searching, so that's definitely an important message. How'd you go about designing the look for the film, just kind of overall? Were you playing kind of on principles that you had built over the years with the other films, or what was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there was definitely a common language that Chloe and I have developed together. You know, which is why I'm saying those collaborations become so valuable, because so much of the work's been done, you know, and it's unspoken. So it was kind of amazing, you know, like thinking back, our conversations, I would just say, I was thinking the camera could move more with Fern in this film. Chloe, what do you think? She was like, yeah, great, do it. And she just sort of trusts me to run with that. Obviously, I'm never going to do anything that she hasn't first kind of come up with, but I just know what she likes, mate. Do you know what I mean? So
Totally.
the suggestion, it's never treading on anyone's toes, because I'm starting with what would Chloe want, and it's and you know, the groundwork's been done in terms of working with non-actors as well.
Because there's a bunch of those in this film, right?
Sorry?
There was a bunch of non-actors in the film.
Yeah, like all our nomads are, you know, first-time actors and never been in front of the camera for the most part. And so, you know, that changes everything, Kenny, doesn't it? That's when, as cinematographers, you put the tools aside and you think about the approach. So with this being the most important thing, with this being these lived-in, true-to-life, I wouldn't even call them performances sometimes. It's like people are literally sharing their stories with us on camera. And it's like, are you really going to stick a silk in front of their face and blast them with a, you know, it's like, no, you're not going to do any of those things, obviously. I mean, it's enough that the camera's observing them. That's it. That's all you get. And so that changes everything. You know, you really work backwards from that point.
Yeah. So it was like a hybrid documentary almost.
Certainly, mate. Yes. Yeah. Nomadland, I guess they would term that sort of hybrid. Chloe and I run out of ways of describing it in a way, mate, because honestly, I don't see that much difference with when I've done documentary work. In fact, if you think a documentary is more true than, I mean, most documentaries, mate, are no more true than the most elaborate fiction. They are edited, they are shot, observed, people are acting a certain way because the camera's there. The filmmaker has a point they want to make. So, it's structured in a way to make you, what's the difference?
If anything, a documentary could be more manipulative because the assumption is that you're watching someone's truth, but the edit can absolutely warp people's meanings, words, anything.
Michael Moore, I find him a kind of a dangerous documentary filmmaker because he does that. And it's like, look, yeah, but you're asking me to trust you, man. I shouldn't have to. You should just give me the facts, you know?
Yeah. And he does it very tongue in cheek as well. It's like he's assuming you know, but not everyone is as educated of a film viewer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like turning around on Charlton Heston in Bowling for Columbine, for example. You know, it's clearly one camera. Yeah, it's shot like there's two. So they literally shot Michael Moore's reaction after the fact. That's what we did on Nomadland.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing. But obviously what's different is, I don't know, Josh, but in the film there's a script and there's, you know, yes. But as we both know, when you start doing a documentary, there's definitely a map of what you're trying to say. So I would just challenge the labels a little bit as well.
Sure.
Because I would also argue quite an interesting thing happens when you approach people with these films, because like on Pine Ridge, for example, the Lakota Indian reservation, they are sick to death, mate, of people coming there and filming them, you know, with a long lens and like gorillas in the mist, you know, like,
right.
Like, oh, look at you, you still exist. And they're just like rolling their eyes. But then when we went in and we were like, the reaction was, really, doing a documentary? And then we're like, no, it's a movie. Do you want to be in it? They're like, totally, that's awesome. What's it about? So it's actually, there's an empowerment that happens. And actually, I would argue that they settle into it. And it's really a collaboration. I really enjoyed it, mate. I found it deeply satisfying to make films with these people in this way.
Well, and I've always said, like, everyone likes being on camera, whether they say it or not. What they don't like is being exposed. They want to be celebrated. Anyone does. And I think in a documentary setting, there's danger of being exposed. But if you have lines or if you have a goal in head, I think you can work towards being celebrated. How many takes were people asking for?
Yeah, well, again, with this approach, usually Chloe would start with the the nomads or the first time actor and ease them in. As you say, you're right. It does. What it does is like Carl Rogers, the clinician, he came up with this thing of like therapy and the ways to ask people questions. And he said a really interesting, and I read it before doing Nomadland, and because he said like you need to look at people as the expert of their own experience. And I was like, that's so awesome in exactly what Chloe's trying to do. Because if you can write for that person and if you can write for their story, they will be it, Yeah. So once the camera comes onto them, it's perfect casting. Chloe's just done it backwards. Okay, she just started with the character and then wrote the script for that character and that person.
Yeah. So say again?
That's what makes it possible. You can't do this and then try to get Swanky to act a certain way. That's unfair on Swanky. She's never pretended to be an actor. She said she was going to bring Swanky. And so, yes, it does empower, it does celebrate her. In fact, that's what Nomadland is meant to be, in my opinion, mate. That's certainly what I was thinking behind the camera, is that we're celebrating this country, Yeah.
How did the project influence your gear choices? Were you just going with what you were familiar with, or what was that like?
Well, I approached it almost like three different films in a way that were kind of folding into each other. There is this documentary element to it, certainly in terms of totally spontaneous things that are happening. But Chloe has created a kind of parameters around that for us to work in. Does that make sense? Like it's an organized chaos, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
And then there are straight up scripted scenes between Fran and David Stratham. Now you have two actors, but now it needs to look as spontaneous as the other stuff, though. It needs to feel like the same movie, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then there was this kind of movement through the landscape. The challenge there, mate, was it just can't feel like a travel log. It can't feel like postcards. It's like, how do you make it emotional, right? So in terms of equipment, those three different things required different equipment for the movement. I went with the Ronin 2. I don't know if you've used it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was liberated, mate. I don't know what they're going to come out with next, but thank goodness they figured it out, because it was great on Nomadland. I had it ready the whole time with the Mini and a mirror just on the cart. So at any one time, there was two cameras for me to just grab in whatever situation. Do you know what I mean? So it was a really rigid language as well that Chloe and I came up with. So with one word, I'm like, okay, it's on the Ronin, go, So
Gotcha.
Very nimble and very quick way of working that made those sort of magic hour hustles possible.
Yeah, because you were shooting a lot at Magic Hour, right?
We did, mate, yes. Again, it was always just discussing emotion and where's Fran in the story and what, and I was influenced by those Hudson Valley River school painters like Beardstad and people, it's the sublime American landscape, the mountains and the ethereal glow in the distance. And it feels like the sun's leaving us behind. There's this decay in the foreground, like a fallen tree or a dead buffalo or something. And you just feel like, yeah, that's the journey west. Like, so that influenced it, And then
Sure.
Grapes of Wrath and John Ford movies, and and we watched Happy together on set. Actually, we did a little screening of Happy together, which was cool, Kenny. It was just the crew. It was like, guys, let's just encourage each other to be as creative and free on this as possible. Because look how cool this fucking movie is.
Yeah. What was your lens choice?
So we shot Zeiss Ultra Primes, which, that was just from Chloe falling in love with them on the rider. It wasn't really a question. And keeping it very limited, 32, 16, 25 or an 18. But, it's really three lenses.
How important, this is a loaded question because I definitely have an opinion. How important is staying to 3 lenses over having a full kit of zooms or an 8 lens kit or having any option you want?
Well, I'm sure we agree, mate, that these limitations are what's going to create the language and look at the film, first and foremost. They create anchors in the story as well. That, when we lead you, there's so many different landscapes in this film, Kenny. That was, as I saw it at the beginning, maybe I was wrong, but that I thought was my biggest challenge, was how to anchor the audience in these places. And I think the lens choice really helps with that as well. Yeah. And too many options is a danger to any artist, I think, isn't it? Yeah. But nevertheless, it's still the hardest thing to do, I think. Keep it simple.
Well, and I think too, the more work you do, the more easily you can think of a lens and just like stand in an area and go, yeah, I know what this will look like on a 23 or 32 or whatever.
The most important thing to us was, as people like Deakins have talked about forever, but it was keeping things wide and close, inside the action, very much
personal.
Yeah, intimacy, and getting almost as close to people as. I don't know what you think about this though, mate, but the way I approach cinematography as well, I'm trying to communicate the way I see the world.
Yeah.
So when I hold my fist, I can see, here's my periphery, right? It's actually pretty wide angle. When do you ever really see anything on a zoom lens?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely of the mind that like I've shot almost everything in my career between 18 and 35.
Okay, cool.
Well, I'll hit a 50 for an insert.
Yeah, a macro insert.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're on the same page, mate. And I would argue, because it was cool, I asked Deakins when he watched Fargo now, would he change anything about it? What would he do differently? And one of the things that came up was that he might be a bit wider with things. And then we went into a conversation about what like trends of cinematography and what it means, like more modern cinematography. Do you know what I mean, mate? And I do think, when we look to films like The Revenant, and we look to some of these bolder choices in cinematography, it seems more geared towards immersiveness, doesn't it? And like this empathy machine, as people describe cinema. And so I'm on board with that, man. And I actually, I watch a lot of like real world gaming stuff. I don't know about you. I'm not a gamer, but I watch it. That's what cinema's up against, in my opinion. If kids are playing that kind of, it is beautiful what they're doing now, isn't it? I stopped playing computer games after GoldenEye on the N64 because I was an addict. But sure, what they're doing now visually is so exciting, I think.
What? And on those streams, the production value is really high. Like I've been producing a couple live streams for some friends, and not like gaming, but like live like this. And you really got to like up the like my Photoshop skills have been put to the test, man. Like you got to put cool designs.
You mean that stuff. Well, I mean that the way these back to Zelda and things like that, just the way you're.
Oh, just the games themselves.
Yeah, the games themselves, the visual language of the game, this immersiveness of a world that you just walk around in. And that's literally the point of the game.
Yeah, there's a couple good, like a lot of film. Let's see, Last of Us 2, God of War. There's a handful of games that like reach out to cinematographers and go like, we're going to put the digital camera in your hands, the iPad, and you film this scene. Like God of War is played as a one take.
Really?
The whole movie. Or the whole game. And
really? See, that's dude, to me that's the vanguard. Like if we're talking visually.
Yeah, it's stunning. It won a ton of awards. But getting back to your project, I see the problem I've noticed with talking with other filmmakers, other cinematographers, is we never want to talk about what we did. It's always like, what's the cool thing that I just saw? One thing I'm trying to do on the podcast is ask each cinematographer to highlight one of their favorite shots and highlight something that was particularly difficult, so you can walk us through the problem solving. So whichever one you'd like to start with, the floor is yours. If you can think that quickly.
Well, a difficult, you know, what's hard about these questions, mate, is I feel like I'm drawing attention to my blunders.
Not necessarily your blunders, just something that particularly was a challenge that you were able to overcome. Not necessarily if it was like a bad shot or anything, but
Okay, well, it's a good lesson because there was a shot towards the end of the movie that I just knew was a dolly shot. And, but I opted not to take a dolly because I just knew I'd never use it other than just maybe this last thing, right? And I got to the shot and I was like, it's a dolly shot. I said it was. How am I ever going to be able to do this shot with the Ronin? Chloe's like, you can do it. Anyway, I did the shot and it's, I can barely look at it now, but it's okay. It's okay. And the stabilization's a great thing, isn't it?
yeah. Would you say that speaks to, because I definitely know this happens to me, that you should go with your gut 9 times out of 10? Like that flow state?
I just made the decision. It probably would have meant a bigger truck. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like, okay, so it's the Ronin or it's the bringing the dolly or keeping things super tight. And I went for the latter. I think it was the right decision. Actually, I do. That was the spirit of it. Kenny, if you keep adding things like that before you know it, you haven't stripped things down at all. Why don't you just throw a few HMIs on there as well? I mean, and now you've got a truck full of lights and you might end up using them, which I don't want. So, it was, I wanted to really limit my resources, So.
Sure. No, I believe in that. So same question on the other side, favorite shot in the film, something that really excited you? Or just like,
I think I've just got to go with close up, man, because that's what I love, dude. That's what I love about cinema. Bergman's quote: "It's the art form of the human face," and I love the way, because it just brought everything together. Like the way Chloe and Fran worked together. When she stood in the doorway at the end of the film, there's a close up of Fran, and I just love everything about her face. And there was a critic that described Fran's face as a national park.
She is a national treasure.
She's a national treasure, man. And that's something else to talk about, Kenny, is I mentioned it earlier, but when it comes to lighting and makeup and dealing with, on certain projects, obviously, you want to make sure you have the actors back and they need to look a certain way. However, on a film like this, man, if you're not celebrating the lines drawn in people's faces, then you shouldn't be shooting it.
I describe that, especially I do color work on the side, and I always say, do a buddy a favor. If you see like a pimple, doesn't need to be there. I know how to get rid of a pimple in Resolve, but like if you've got, a craggly face and it's supposed to be craggly, like maybe a little bit of mid-tone detail to heighten that, the way you light it,
I just think
lines are beautiful.
Yeah. And I remember at film school, I don't know how cinematography was for you. I mean, it was amazing. I didn't know what an f-stop was when I arrived at NYU. So Sandy Sissel, Tony Gianelli, Peter Stein, Tom Richmond. I just owe so much to them. They encouraged me endlessly. However, I do remember some discussions. We were watching a scene. I won't say which film, but there's a scene where the actress has a particular vein that kind of, to her vein, it protrudes a bit. She's emotional. And it was a discussion about, is that a mistake on the cinematographer's part? And I felt really strongly about it. Absolutely not. No, it's beautiful. In fact, the scene was about her remembering when she was the beauty queen at the prom or something. So the more wrinkles, the better, isn't it? But you know what I'm saying, mate? There's a sort of go-to thing sometimes in this industry and with cinematographers where you're not thinking, you're just making something pretty. And that's not, man, because,
That's definitely, I think, early in their career cinematographer move is to just make everything a pretty shot.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Often, is it 3-point lighting? Is it supposed to look like it's on stage,
You can teach a mum 3-point lighting. Do you know what I mean? No, it's tricky, mate. I mean, I also feel like, what was I going to say? Because Deacon's talked about it a lot as well, man. You know, the sort of the cosmetic trends we're seeing in cinematography. You know, I think, and it troubles me a bit because it's being led by the commercial industry and music videos.
Yeah,
it's not coming from storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I literally could talk to you for another 2 hours about this kind of stuff, but we gotta wrap it up. So just to end it, you know, I like to ask, you know, what advancements excite you about cinematography? You know, what have you done, especially during this year, that's helped you creatively? And do you have any more personal projects or anything on the way?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited by all the fact that these cameras are getting smaller and smaller. You know, it's like that Francis Ford Coppola prophecy back in the day. Remember that? You basically YouTube, and that's where we are, mate. And I am on board, dude. I am. The more the smaller these cameras can be, and the more people can make movies and them look aesthetic, you know, look cinematic, is so exciting. I think, you know, 10 years we'll be watching YouTube, mate. In fact, even now, I just watched something the other day. There's a little girl in Pine Ridge just filming a horse outside her trailer home. This beautiful white horse. It just runs off into the Badlands, and it's like one of the coolest little short movies you've ever seen. So I think I'm excited for the sort of professionalism to get broken down a bit, and then we can really start taking off as you know, an art form. It's
totally.
Good. Yeah. So, what was the last part?
Personal projects, anything that you're doing that you enjoy, you know, photography, other movies, music, whatever.
Yeah, well, I've been writing a lot, and Chloe and I we were sort of setting up other projects in the future, and sort of generating our own material, really. So I think I'm going to take on oceanscapes next, mate, which might be a horrible idea. But, you know, I grew up by the sea, so I'm excited. Let's try and I was so inspired by this film Leviathan, not the Russian one, the GoPro one on the fishing boat.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Kenny. So yeah, pretty exciting.
Awesome. Well, I also grew up, like I said, in the Bay Area next to the ocean, so I will look forward to that.
Well, so if it happens, mate, fingers crossed. You never know.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for being the first guest on Frame and Reference. I really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, you'll hear us next time.
Thanks, Kenny.
So once again, thanks to Josh for having that conversation with me. I had a great time. I hope you did too, listener. I will say he did mention how Tarkovsky influenced him, and I realized that I hadn't actually studied any Russian cinematographers, especially not in college, but even recently, which is an oversight on my part. So I went and got his book, Sculpting in Time, which you can see right here if you're watching the video version. If you didn't know, actually, I should bring it up. Frame and Reference comes in 3 formats. You can read it at ProVideoCoalition.com. You can watch it at YouTube.com/Owlbot, OWLBOT. Or you can listen to it. Hopefully, that's kind of what you're doing now. It's available on most any platform. But anywho, Sculpting in Time by Andrei Tarkovsky here. I'm gonna really enjoy that because there is a sort of documentary style, I'll say, cinematography out there that I briefly studied and then got really more into more formal cinematography myself, even though almost all of my early work was very documentary style. So I was doing that more intuitively and not as an educated cinematographer, as it were. That came later. But enough about me. Once again, thanks to Josh for having that conversation with me. Thanks to ProVideo for distributing this. And thanks to you for listening. You will hear us in the next one. Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Matte Box logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the interview you just heard by visiting ProVideoCoalition.com or YouTube.com/Owlbot respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.